Five Live Daily with Peter Allen.
Good afternoon. 20 minutes of the programme left, and as ever at this time of the week we try to have a look at some depth at a particular topic in the news, and today it's electronic cigarettes. Came on the market in 2004. There are now more than 2.5 million users, or vapers as they're known, in the UK. 500,000 of those were thought to have taken up vaping in the last 12 months alone. Still 10 million regular smokers in the UK. That's 22% of all adult males and 17% of women. Still high figures, aren't they? Smoking rates have, though, dropped sharply, in particular since 1974. And e-cigarettes, of course, are used by many who are trying to quit. Are they safe? Do they work? We had a report by Public Health England earlier this year, which said they were 95% less harmful than traditional tobacco products and could be prescribed on the NHS. But then it became illegal last week for retailers to sell e-cigarettes to those under 18. So are they harmful or not? The European Union wants to ban the sale of some of these vaping devices altogether. That's being challenged, so we're not sure how that's going to work out. So we thought it was a good time to have a look at what are electronic cigarettes, what are the laws, how harmful might they be, should they be prescribed on the NHS. We've got to help in that process a panel of well-informed people: Adam Brimelow, health correspondent; Sarah Jakes from the New Nicotine Alliance; Deborah Arnott, who's chief executive of the anti-tobacco health charity Action on Smoking, ASH; and Ram Murthy, who's from the British Medical Association. I'll begin with Sarah James, if I might. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Hello, Peter.
Smoker for 34 years.
That's right.
And then switched to vaping.
That's right, 2.5 years ago now.
Did it do the trick?
Absolutely, absolutely. I wasn't actually intending to stop smoking at the time, although I'd tried plenty of times in the past. Bought an e-cigarette pretty much on a whim, and 2.5 years later I'm still not smoking.
Any effect or impact on your health that you can spot?
All good ones, basically. You know, I used to have a smoker's cough. That's now gone, and just generally better able to breathe.
Right.
Don't get so out of breath.
What's in them?
What's in them? Well, basically the e-liquid has 4 ingredients. That's propylene glycol, vegetable glycerine, small amount of nicotine, and flavourings.
And so how does it compare with the idea of smoking? Do you get the same sort of hit from it?
It's similar. It's not completely the same. You know, there is a bit of a transition for people to make from one to the other. But for me, it was a very satisfying replacement for my previous smoking habit. Right.
So are you bemused then by the kind of debate about e-cigarettes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah? I think bemused and frustrated would be the best description of that. Okay.
We'll come back to you in a moment. I want to talk to Adam Brimelow, I think, next. Good morning or good afternoon to you, Adam.
Hi, Peter.
Now then, actually, when we're talking about the impact of them, and in a moment I'm going to talk about the legislation surrounding them, but what's the latest evidence about what e-cigarettes do, if anything, to your health?
Well, I think in one word I would say is it's disputed. There was, though, as you mentioned, that report by Public Health England, which looked at a lot of the most recent evidence on the impact of e-cigarettes. And it came out really as a pretty strong endorsement, certainly comparing them to normal cigarettes. They're much, much safer. And really suggesting that many thousands of lives could be saved if lots of smokers switched to the use of e-cigarettes. Now, there are still some public health experts, though, who are not satisfied by the evidence. They say it's really too soon to say what the long-term effects are. But there does seem to be a body of evidence building up, suggesting that they could be a useful public health tool in terms of reducing the impact of smoking by encouraging people to switch to e-cigarettes.
Right. Now, we've got legislation around this. We've got an e-cigarette company called Totally Wicked turning up in Luxembourg last week, trying to stop some legislation before it comes into force in Britain. Well, what's that all about?
Yeah, this is to do with Article 20 of the EU Tobacco Products Directive, or the TPD, and basically, this is the European Union trying to get a handle on the huge expansion of the use of e-cigarettes that we've seen in recent years. And they want to ensure the market develops in a way that supports public health objectives. And it's due to come into force in spring next year. Now, this company, totally wicked. It says the restrictions that are involved are completely disproportionate. For a start, it says that this is a tobacco directive for a product that doesn't actually contain tobacco. So that's a bad place to start. And they're concerned beyond that about two things, really. First of all, limits on the strength of nicotine and the size of refill containers and cartridges. They're saying that essentially those restrictions would mean that for heavier smokers, they're not going to get a satisfactory hit from an e-cigarette, because the stronger ones would either be banned or they'd have to apply for a license as a medicinal product. And you know, that may well not happen. So they're saying that for heavier smokers who might benefit most from these products, they're not going to get the same kind of benefit. Right. And they're also unhappy about very strong restrictions on advertising as well that would be introduced under this directive.
Smoking is banned in a lot of public places, and now illegal, I think, to smoke in cars with children under 18, isn't it? So what's the situation about e-cigarettes?
Well, put very simply, those restrictions don't cover e-cigarettes, so they're excluded. Though having said that, in Wales, they are planning to bring e-cigarette restrictions into line with normal cigarettes from about 2012. That's something that's just going through legislation at the moment. But so there's going to be an inconsistent approach across the UK. And of course, there are workplaces, for example, where people are told they can't use e-cigarettes. So it's not a completely consistent picture up and down the country. But the legislative restrictions as things stand exclude e-cigarettes, and so people are much freer to use them.
Right. I mean, has there been an assessment of what sort of health benefits, Adam, this might produce, or these e-cigarettes might produce?
There's an awful lot of sort of sifting through the evidence going on at the moment. And I think what was produced by Public Health England was seen by a lot of people as a first best guess of where we are in terms of the potential health benefits, or at least the reductions in the risk of harms that could be associated with using these products. But it is, because they're such a new product and they're being so very widely used, the evidence is really still emerging. And I think that on one thing people would be agreed, we need to keep a very close eye on the evidence as it emerges.
Right, yeah, thank you. Let's talk then to my last two guests, Dr. Ram Murthy, who's from the British Medical Association. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Peter.
And Deborah Arnott, Chief Executive at ASH. Hi, Deborah.
Good afternoon.
Doctor, let's first ask you, I'm interested in vaping. I can't imagine taking anything and sucking it into your lungs is necessarily a good idea. I'd like to know if there's any evidence at all that vaping does damage.
I mean, as Adam has already said, I think the difficulty is getting some any clear evidence. The evidence out there is very conflicting, with some studies suggesting there's very little harm, some suggesting there may be more harm. And the struggle that doctors are having on the front line is, how can we properly advise our patients? Certainly, e-cigarette use is going to be less harmful than tobacco smoking. And therefore, that's what we should be looking for and what we should be welcoming. And moving people away from the huge harms that tobacco has onto purely using e-cigarettes may likely reduce that harm. Where the concern remains is dual use, so people who continue to smoke as well as use e-cigarettes are less likely to see significant benefit.
Yeah, and what about, I mean, do you get hooked on it, do you think? I mean, somebody texting saying, are you addicted to vaping instead?
Well, I mean, the issue with tobacco smoking has always been the nicotine that is what's addictive. So what smokers have always struggled with when they try to give up is to remove that addiction to nicotine. So e-cigarettes are providing, like other nicotine-related products such as gums and patches, is providing that nicotine hit that smokers need because of the addiction. And what we don't see at the moment is the evidence to suggest that people can completely come off the nicotine. Certainly what the studies have shown are looking at purely at the moment is people moving from smoking tobacco to using e-cigarettes.
I wonder whether it could also lead the other way, because if you could take up vaping when you're not a smoker and then maybe decide you're size, I mean, you know, that could happen as well, couldn't it?
I mean, I think that's certainly one of the huge concerns, and that's why the BMA has been lobbying very hard on ensuring these devices are properly regulated to ensure their safety, but also the advertising, and that they shouldn't be aimed or targeted at non-smokers. I think the evidence is still needed, as in we don't really know is whether it works the other way. But there are lots of doctors and other public health experts who remain hugely concerned about an addiction developing in a non-smoker to what is potentially a harmful substance.
Yeah, you are taking in a harmful substance in the end.